How does Balder talk about the death of Balder and the
yeah.
significance of it and
Well,
all that?
so Balder is, let's call him the favorite son of Odin.
Everyone loves Balder.
He's the golden child. He's everybody's favorite. He's the guy that you just can't help but like. And he has a nightmare about his own death and Ragnarok. And that terrifies him because, I mean, why wouldn't it terrify you? That would scare the shit out of me. I was like, I died and then the world ended.
I mean, it's the end of the world.
Right. It's awful. And so he goes to his mother and he's like, this is happening. His mom's like, all right, we're going to fix this. Don't you worry about it, baby boy. Pat on the head. You know,
you won't die.
Pat on the back. You go out there and you make friends as always.
Yep.
So mommy's going to take care of it. So she goes around to the entire world and gets an oath from every person, creature, and object that they will not harm Balder.
Yeah.
Nothing will hurt him.
Which I think is pretty impressive that she did that and succeeded.
Yeah. With one exception. And it's not because the thing said no.
No, it's because she didn't even bother to ask.
She didn't ask mistletoe. Mm-hmm. Because it just looked so darn harmless. So she didn't bother. And so Balder now has this blanket immunity from everything and everyone. And so the gods now have this game they like to play called Let's Throw Shit at Balder.
It's a pretty fun sounding game.
Because nothing can hurt him.
No.
And they see it as doing Balder this great honor. They're like, we're going to let you showcase your invulnerability. And they're just throwing fucking spears at him. They're slinging rocks at his face. And it all just bounces off harmlessly.
And Balder's amused.
Right. And Balder's like, this is great. Thanks, guys. Like, because now he's got this game he can play with everybody. Everybody gets to join in. It's awesome.
It's like, let's throw whatever we want at Balder.
Now, you know what hates something perfect? The trickster.
Yeah.
So Loki's like, I don't like this. This is... Because tricksters like to find flaws. Because that's how they play tricks on you. They find the flaw, they twist the flaw, they go, ha, isn't that funny? Balder doesn't have a flaw. He's like, everybody loves him. Nobody's going to hurt him. Everyone's get to play this game with him. I don't like this. Ooh, I get to do the honors.
You get a sleeve.
Oh,
I
nice.
get a sleeve because there will be no double dipping. But
No
you can
double
take,
dipping.
You can take big dips.
Not in these unprecedented times. I'm getting so sick of unprecedented times. I'm tired of hearing it. Tired of hearing it. Remember when it was 2 weeks? Just got to make it to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that's good.
Right?
That was very
You
good.
can come over here and try it, Chris.
Oh, I got my off-brand Starbucks.
Oh, hell yeah.
Starbucks off-brand. We're very clear about
Yeah, name brand's too expensive.
All right,
So Loki's like, I don't like this. So he disguises himself as one of Frey's handmaids. Goes to her and says like, so, I see this fun game they're out there playing with Balder. What's that all about? She's like, oh, I got oaths from everybody. Nothing can hurt him. And Loki was like, nothing? He goes, well, there's mistletoe, but I didn't ask mistletoe. What's mistletoe gonna do? It's fine. And Loki's like, sick. Disappears immediately. He's like, I got some shit to do.
I'm going to figure out how the fuck to use mistletoe to kill Balder.
And so he goes and gathers up some mistletoe and makes a spear or an arrow out of it, some kind of projectile. And then goes to where the gods are. Yeah. They're all still throwing shit at Balder. And he goes up to this blind god named Hod, who is, I want to say, another son of Odin.
Probably.
And he's like, hey, man, why aren't you...
I mean, to be pedantic, because that's my thing. I've decided.
My defining trait.
Yeah.
I'm pedantic.
Odin is the All-Father.
That's true. He is father of all.
Continue.
Hang on, I just took a bite.
You know what? I've emotionally damaged you. I'm sorry.
I don't know how I'm going to do. So he goes over to Hod. He's like, hey, man, why aren't you playing this game with everybody? And Hod's like, well, I mean, I'm blind. So, like, I don't know where he's at. I don't have a weapon. You know, can't really join in. And he's like, I tell you what, man. This is like a big deal for Balder. He really loves this. So I'm going to help you honor him. Here's a weapon. And he hands him this missile or projectile made out of mistletoe. And he goes, and I'll just point you to where he's at. And
Is that where missile comes from?
No. It was already called that.
Oh. All right.
I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't think it is.
That'd be cool. Sorry.
But, well, it's not spelled missile like projectile. But,
English language is a bastard language. It doesn't matter. Let's move on.
It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, that sounds good. So Loki lines him up, puts the spear in his hand, goes, all right, go ahead. And he throws it or launches it, kills Balder. And everyone just stopped. They're like, what the fuck? Immediately, everybody's pissed.
Of course.
Because the greatest guy in the room just died.
The most powerful man in the room, because he literally cannot be damaged by anything, has just died. That you've ruined our game.
And, of course, no one's mad at Hod because he's blind.
Yeah.
They're like, you son of a bitch, Loki. And so Loki runs away, and they're all mad at him.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we're going to catch Loki. We're going to make him pay for this. And there's a whole other little shenanigans going on that with him turning into a fish and some nets and Thor and whatever.
But
eventually they catch him. But in the meantime, Freya's distraught because her favorite son is dead.
So from the point of view of Gaiman's book, that story, the death of Balder, it continues on with going after Loki. But then the next chapter is Freya doing what you're about to say.
And so she's like, someone needs to go to hell, get my baby back. I want my boy. And so Hermod's like, I got it. Odin lets him take his horse, one of Loki's children, ride it into hell to speak to Loki's daughter, Hel, to get Balder back. And Balder is sitting as the guest of honor of a feast. Hel's stoked. She's like, that's right. I got Balder. Fuck you guys.
Everybody is thrilled that Balder is dead in hell.
Right.
Like
everybody in hell's like, whoa, yes.
Yeah.
It's like your team just drafted peak Tom Brady. You're like, yo, we got him.
Yeah.
And Hermod's like, hey, really going to need that guy back. Everybody up there misses him. And Hel's like, well, I'll tell you what. If everything weeps with sadness for Balder's death, I'll give him back.
So the way that it's phrased in Gaiman's book is, what was the messenger's name?
Hermod.
Yeah. Hermod literally is like, everyone is literally weeping that he's dead. He wasn't supposed to die.
Yeah.
I want to bring him back. And Hel's like, okay, but only if that is true. Like,
right.
you gotta go back.
Yeah, you gotta prove.
You gotta ask everyone.
Yeah.
If that's true.
Yeah.
And so he's like, okay.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, I could do that. There in the Edda version, there's a conversation between Hermod and Balder, where in Balder's funeral pyre, Odin had put Draupnir on him.
Oh.
And they burned it with him.
I think that actually came up in this one, but I didn't review that story.
And there's a little bit of confusion about like the way the story is told, independent of the story of getting the treasures, because the dwarves were like, yeah, it'll drip these rings. And so, like, it was made with that intent. But then when they tell the story of Balder's death, it didn't do that until after. So, like, he put it on him. It was just the gift from the dwarves. It didn't do anything. But then when Hermod's like, well, I got to go back and, like, get everybody to cry, Balder was like, well, here, take this. And after bringing it out of the underworld is when it would start to do that. So there's a little bit of confusion about whether or not it was made to do that or started doing that after.
Okay.
But Odin had given it to him when he died. He hands it back to Hermod. Be like, give that back to Dad. Tell him I'm okay. He's like, all right, cool. He rides back up. They go around the whole world again, just like they did with the oaths. Get everybody to cry. So everybody's sad. Mistletoe is sad. Mistletoe cries. Mm-hmm. Who doesn't is a giantess named Thanks.
Yeah.
Doesn't cry.
That bitch.
Says, let Hel keep what she's got. I don't give a fuck about Balder. And it turns out that's Loki in disguise.
Yep.
So Hel's like, not everybody did it. Can't have Balder back.
Which, again, Loki, could have said, nah, I'm not sad Balder's dead. Fuck him.
Right. Loki could have just done it as him. But he's like, can't be me. I'm already wanted for his death. I don't want to be also wanted for his failure to undie.
Yeah.
So then they capture Loki, and they're like, you're going to pay for this shit. And so they summon two of his sons. I don't remember their names. But they turn one into a wolf and make him savagely disembowel his brother in front of Loki. And then use that son's intestines to tie Loki to a rock in a cave. Kill the wolf son in front of him. and then get a venomous snake and tie it above his head so that for the rest of eternity the venom drips on his face.
The snake is also his child, isn't it?
It's I don't know if the snake is. It's not Jormungandr.
Oh, okay.
It's just
I knew he gave
a different
birth
snake.
to a
Yes.
snake child.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't give birth, but he fathered a snake child.
yeah.
He did give birth to at least one child.
And his wife stays with him
Mm-hmm.
and holds a bowl under the snake to catch the venom. But eventually it fills up. So she has to,
Loki's wife?
Mhm.
Loki has a wife?
he does.
Oh.
And so she's holding this bowl, but eventually it fills up. She's got to go dump it out.
Yeah.
So then she leaves, and in the meantime, it starts dripping on his face, and he gets all pissed, and he says really mean things to her. And he starts writhing around, and that's where they say earthquakes come from. It's Loki struggling to get out of his bonds. And then she comes back, and she puts the bowl back, and she starts catching more.
And then he stops
then he
thrashing.
stops, so then the earthquake stops.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, headcanon confirmed, Loki lives under California.
That's right. And when California snaps off, which will eventually happen, Ragnarok.
Damn.
Ship, fingernails of the dead, all that stuff.
Damn.
That was an interesting tradition. They believed that the army of the undead from hell were going to arrive on a ship made out of the fingernails of the dead, which is why in their funerary practices they would trim the fingernails of the dead because then it was less material for the ship, and so it would push Ragnarok farther off.
Wow. Didn't know that.
Yeah, it's weird.
That is weird.
But yeah, when Loki escapes, Ragnarok.
Cool. All right. Any final thoughts on that before I tell my story about the Master Builder?
Man, there's
Because
there's probably too much to unpack there.
Yeah.
In a sense, Baldur is this sort of like
it's
messianic figure.
It's the ultimate tragedy.
Yeah.
The
Well,
man, the invincible man everyone loves. You shot Superman.
Well, it's like if Jesus died but then didn't resurrect.
Yeah.
It's just the crucifixion.
Fuck.
Like there's no 3 days later. So it's the ideal that's Baldur, and you find out he's not ideal, which is what the trickster is supposed to do. The trickster is supposed to find the things that you think make sense and point out exactly how they don't.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this ideal, and the trickster's like, actually, you know how that shit's flawed? Mistletoe. Pff, got him.
Marvel did a comic in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very political comic. It was Loki for president.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Where Loki proceeded to point out all of the flaws in the American voting political system, specifically for president. Because he ran for president and won, because he is technically an American citizen, because he inhabited and was birthed. He inhabited the form of a human fetus and was birthed by an American family, and he has an American birth certificate.
Yeah.
That he provides to show that he is, he is in fact an American citizen and is technically 43 years old, or something like
They
that.
tried to Obama him, and he was like, no. Got it.
And then halfway through his campaign, he turns into a woman, just because. And
then tanks, loses.
no, because now all of the feminists are like, we love this.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, his entire base before he turned into a woman is like, what the fuck?
Why'd you do that?
For fun. I'm going to lie to your faces and you're going to love me for it. He said that in his opening gambit. It's a 4-issue miniseries. It's hilarious.
That sounds hilarious.
Would highly recommend.
But yeah, so it's like mistletoe is sort of the thing you underestimate. You know, it's the thing that you thought was harmless. It's the thing Freya was like, I don't need to know from that. Don't got to worry about that. And that's the thing that ends up biting you in the ass. So it's always the thing that you thought wouldn't be a problem that is the problem. And the trickster's the one who's going to let you know that.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that the giant that doesn't weep, and the reason that Baldur can't come back is named Thanks.
Yeah, I immediately was thinking that when you told me.
And I
her
think
name.
that's, on a more philosophical level, that's why it couldn't just be Loki. Like, we had to have a reason for the thing to be named Thanks. So it had to be Loki transformed under a different name.
No thanks.
And I'm still sort of struggling with what that means, in a sense that it's like, I'm thinking out loud now. If Baldur's the ideal, and then you find out he's not the ideal,
What do you mean Santa's not real?
then you shouldn't be angry that you learned that there was a flaw. That's a good thing. Because you were putting it up on this pedestal as invincible, and it turns out it wasn't. You may not have liked how you learned it, but you should be thankful that you did.
I don't think anybody's going to be thankful about this prophecy's coming true, though.
No, but that's what happens when you put everything in mythological terms. It's
Yeah.
like, well, it's going to end the world.
In the
It's
short...
like, well, but what does ending the world mean?
No, I can see what you're saying. When you
Metaphorically,
really
it
think
just-
about it, it's good that we found out about this flaw. In the future, when we need to make
Now we
someone...
know to get mistletoe on board.
Yeah. Get everyone on board.
Get everybody.
Which is actually pretty relevant to Ragnarok, because we're not going to get into Ragnarok. But
No.
there was an important thing about Ragnarok that I remember from my first time reading the book, from Gaiman's Norse mythology book, is Loki wanted the world to end.
Yeah.
He, sought out the end of the world. You know, he wanted Balder to die, and he wanted everything after to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But then, when the world does end, there's, I forget who the being is. You might be able to fill in that blank. Someone tells Loki, well, look, you don't understand. The world can't actually end. It'll be reborn.
Mm-hmm.
You've lost. And some of the gods from this cycle, it continue on into the next.
Yeah. I know two sons of Thor survive.
Balder comes back.
Yeah, Balder and I believe it's Hermod. Those two
Yeah.
come back. Because
And
Hermod goes
some-
back to the underworld.
A couple sons of Thor survive.
Mm-hmm. And they had hidden away a man and a woman. And they restart the world.
Yeah.
But...
And there's going to be another Ragnarok, but they call it something else in the next cycle.
yeah, and that one's going to be caused by Nidhogg, the dragon.
Ooh, cool.
Yeah, that's because the world tree, I mean, shakes, Nidhogg comes in, but it's something like at the end of Ragnarok, you see Nidhogg flying off with a handful of undead, and it's like, Nidhogg's coming back. Yeah, I think the idea is something like, if you sort of build up this ideal, and you think it's perfect, and then the shadow trickster is going to tear it down for you and be like, nah, man, it's not perfect, actually. It's got this very obvious fucking issue. If you've built so much of yourself around that ideal, it's going to feel like the world is ending.
Because it's a value.
Yeah, it's
If
something
you have
that
a
you
value
thought...
ripped
that-
away from you.
Yeah, it's going to suck, and it's going to feel like the world ends. And it's going to have consequences. Like, you should be thankful that you learned that.
Sorry for
but
crinkling.
that doesn't mean it's going to be pretty. Like the fallout of having to find some new ideal. That's rough.
Yeah.
But the benefit is Ragnarok isn't literally the end.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a new world where Balder is back. You do have the ideal again. You'll find a new ideal, a new Balder, and a new world in which that makes sense. And at some point, something's going to come along and it's going to fuck it up. Nidhogg's coming back, but it'll just start all over again.
Because, that's life. It's enduring.
That's
like,
I mean,
even despite
when
death,
when
life
I was a
continues.
child, the ideal was an astronaut. I was like, I'm going to fucking be that.
Same.
And then it wasn't. One day I was just like, I don't think that's it, man. I don't think that's the thing for me.
Yeah, it was when I realized that only rich people get into space that I kind of was devastated.
Unrealistic. that was the mistletoe.
Yeah,
Money.
money. When I realized how capitalist our society is, I kind of lost that. Then I was like, all right, I'll try for firefighter then.
A little more achievable. But yeah, that is the death of Balder.
Okay, so I've got one more story.
All right, we can do Master Builder. I think we'll call it after that.
Yeah, so the Master Builder. So this was early days. This was shortly after the war between the Aesir and the Vanir was ended. They had their peace treaty. Thor was off fighting trolls. And Asgard was undefended, and they were a little nervous about it because they had, like, no defenses outside of Thor.
I love that Thor is this, like, Superman character.
Yeah.
When in every story they need, like, a giant involved in the conflict somehow. Either Thor doesn't have Mjolnir for some reason, or he's away.
Yeah.
They're like, we can't, I mean, because if Thor's here and he's got the hammer, they're just dead.
Yeah.
He's just going to on-site every fucking giant.
And the reason why he brings up giants, audience, is because there's a giant in this story.
No.
We'll get there. So, yeah, they're a little bit nervous, and woe behold, the Master Builder arrives. He's just a dude. He's like, hey, I'll build you a wall around Asgard, keep you safe. I can do it in 3 seasons. In exchange for 3 things. And so, you know, the gods are like, all right, what do you want? And he's like, I want Freya's hand in marriage, which, of course you do.
Everybody wants that.
Fucking everybody wants Freya's hand in marriage. And they're like, all right, what are the other 2 things? And he said, I want the sun and I want the moon. He doesn't want much, does he?
No. Reasonable ask.
Yeah, sure. Like, build a wall around Asgard. I get a wife, and I get the sun, and I get the moon.
Small. Pennies.
Like it's absurd. Like, the idea that anybody owns the sun or the moon. He's like, yeah, okay, we're the gods, we'll give that to you.
Interesting point to bring up. The sun and the moon are people.
Oh.
In this. They're driving chariots. Like, there's people there. They're being chased by a wolf. So when he's like, I want the sun and the moon. It's like, for what? What are you going to do with them?
Well, in Gaiman's version, that didn't come up, or I didn't remember that coming up. It was kind of left to my interpretation that the sun and moon were physical entity, like physical things in the world that this builder wanted. And so, you know, the gods, the pantheon of gods, they talk amongst themselves, and they were like, well, we can't. One of those things is too valuable to give that guy. Like, Freya doesn't want to marry that guy.
No.
And we need the sun and the moon. He wants all 3. This is too much of an ask. No. And then Loki, of course, comes up with a great idea.
I got a plan. Yeah.
He's like, all right, I have an idea. What if we tell him, build the wall in 1 season? Because he said 3 seasons, which is roughly 18 months.
Yeah.
He's like, what if we tell him you got to build the wall in 1 season, and we tell him he has to do it by himself. He gets no help. They're like, why would we ask him to do that? He's like, well, because then he will get the foundation in, and then we can finish it. It'll save us a lot of trouble. And almost all of the gods think this is a great idea. Except, you know, of course, for Freya.
Right.
Freya is like, I am uncomfortable about this idea. But,
swear to God, if I end up marrying a giant, Loki.
But Loki is, like, very persuasive, of course. And is like, nah, look, this is a solid idea. Okay?
Definitely gonna work.
Like, and he like...
There's no downside.
Like, literally, there's no possible way he'll finish. And then we can build a really good wall because the foundation will be fantastic. He's a master builder, right? If he truly is a master builder, he'll build a great foundation. And when he fails, you know, it's like, oh, well, sorry. Maybe we'll even punish him if we want to for, like, having the audacity to come up with this idea. And, you know, the gods generally agree, this is a great idea, Loki. We're glad you're on our side.
Bum, bum, bum. Looks into camera.
So they go to the master builder, or rather, they summon the master builder back into their presence, and they're like, "Okay, here are the terms. Here, like, you've made your offer. Here's our counter offer. we'll give you what you want, but you have to do it in a season and you can't have any help. Like, you're a forbidden help. And the Master Builder's like, okay, you said I'm not permitted, like, any help. What about my horse? He lugs the blocks. And so the gods are like, yeah, okay, that's reasonable. We'll let you have your horse for assistance. And he's like, okay. You know, Loki's like, okay, tomorrow's the first day of winter. Your deadline is the first day of summer. He's like, okay, I'll get to work. Next day, it's, in the morning, all the gods go out there to see what he's doing, and they see him coming back with his first set of blocks that his horse is hauling behind him. And this horse is hauling a lot of blocks, and they're big blocks. And then when they get to the construction site, they discover that the Master Builder has no problem lifting these heavy blocks and setting them down in the perfect spot. And these blocks are amazing, by the way. He's a Master Builder, right? I don't know if I mentioned. They are perfectly constructed blocks that just set, because they're so large, set down easily. He doesn't even really need to build much of a foundation. There was a little bit of digging, but not much. The foundation was set, within a week. And the gods are like, fuck!
We're screwed.
We're so
Freya's
fucked.
gonna be pissed.
Freya is pissed. Freya's like, I want to punish the man responsible for this. And Loki's like, who's that?
Looks into camera again.
And Odin's like...
You motherfucker.
Odin... No, sorry. Odin doesn't say anything yet. Freya points the finger at Loki and is like, this is your fault, this was your idea. And Loki's like, we all agreed that this was a good idea. We all agreed to this. I don't think it's fair to say that, any one of us is culpable here. And Odin's like, nah, it's you. This was your idea.
You smooth talking son of a bitch. This is on you.
So, yeah, they bully him into fixing this. Mostly Freya. Freya's like, if I have to take his hand in marriage, I am killing you before I go. It will happen. And Odin's like, this is fair.
Fair deal again.
Yep. And so, hang on, audience, pause one moment. I am scooping cream cheese because this snack is just so good. Always have snacks when you're discussing books.
So good.
Or reading books, or just always have snacks.
Just snack.
Just snacking's good for you.
Keeps your metabolism up.
I mean, don't go nuts, but
yeah, healthy snacks.
yeah. Anyways, where was I?
So what's Loki doing now?
Yeah, no. So Loki is like, okay, I'll fix this. The deadline is getting nearer and nearer, right? This Master Builder is. I mean, it's in the name. He's building this wall, and he's getting pretty close to done with it. He's getting pretty close to the deadline. Loki told the rest of the gods, he's not gonna finish. There's no way. But then, as that deadline got closer and closer, the gods were less and less certain that was correct. Mm-hmm. Sorry. So, what Loki decides to do is take the form of a mare and lure this horse off. I actually jotted down the horse's name. It has a name. It is Svaldafari. So, Svaldafari is a giant horse in disguise. The Master Builder is a giant in disguise. He's a giant man in disguise. And that is why they are doing so well. The gods suspect that that's what this is, and the sooner he gets to finishing, the more certain that they are that their hunch is correct. And they're pissed that they even took this deal in the first place, because they wouldn't have made this deal with a giant.
Right.
Right? They feel deceived. So Loki's solution is, as I said, to take the form of a mare and lure the horse away, 3 days before the deadline. And the Master Builder is pissed, but he can't do anything about it except try and finish the wall. And he nearly does it. On the last day, he only needs to put down 10 more blocks, and then he's done. On the day before the first day of summer. And the gods know this, so they start taunting him. And when it becomes clear that he definitely has failed, they taunt him even more.
Sore winners.
And
you hate it.
And it is in this moment, because even the giant can acknowledge, like, even now, he's not going to succeed. He like, because this haul that he has, he only has 8 blocks.
Yeah.
He can't finish. So the gods start taunting him because, you know, it's evident, like, he's lost. Like, he doesn't have time on his own to get more blocks. So he is a sore loser, naturally, because they're being sore winners.
Yeah.
And he reveals his true form, which is a mountain giant. And he's about to start wrecking shit because he's going to be a sore loser. But Thor swoops in and saves the day.
Yep.
Like at the last possible moment before he destroys
Hey,
this.
I'm back. Oh, shit.
Yeah. Before he can destroy this wall. Yeah. Hammer to the head. And then, you know, the gods finish the wall. They put 10 more blocks in. But those last 10 blocks, it's hard to deny that that work does not look as good as the rest of the wall. And there are some gods that say, man, we really should have let him put those last 8 blocks down, because he trashed those blocks.
Yeah. We could have got 8 more out of him.
Yeah.
Dang it.
Well, so the way this story ends is Loki disappeared for a year. And when he came back, he had a foal with him. An 8-legged foal, which was weird.
Yeah.
And he took care of this foal for, you know, another couple years. And then when this foal was full grown into a majestic 8-legged stallion, he gifted it to Odin.
Yep.
It is an open secret amongst the court of gods that this is Loki's child. It is very easy to put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, he turned into a female horse.
You're right.
And let off a male horse with a boner.
Yeah.
And he comes back with a baby horse. I'm no scientist, but 2 + 2.
Now, that said, Loki did this. And Loki is very particular about being made fun of. So it is very few people that ever...
Aren't we all?
That ever allude to this in his presence.
Yeah.
And no one makes the mistake of doing it twice. You will regret it.
I'm trying to think of someone who's not particular about being made fun of. I can only think of mentally unwell people. Like someone with really bad self-esteem issues might just be like, yeah, you're right. But like, people with a healthy self-image are going to be like, all right, that's enough.
Right. I just think it's interesting, like, because Loki has other children.
Yeah.
And he's not ashamed of those children.
But he's not the mother of those children. He's the father of those children.
Exactly.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a weird one.
Are you sure you don't want to do Thor's wedding?
I do not have the time.
Hi, this is Functionally Literate. Hope you've been enjoying listening. This episode is brought to you by me. I made this show. I'm Ryan. I'm broke. If you could donate a little money my way with a sponsorship or a product, like, I'll be a shill for money. And I'm going to use that money with which to buy books, because let me tell you, right now I'm checking stuff out of the library, and it's rough. You can email me at funk.lit.pod@gmail.com. That is FUNC.LIT.POD@gmail.com. You could also be a patron of this podcast. That's right. this podcast, Functionally Literate, we're going places. We have a Patreon now. You can give me $1, and in exchange, you will be able to listen to this podcast ad-free. That means right now, you don't have to listen to this bit. You can listen to the podcast uninterrupted. It just goes without me going on about things that you don't care about. Just for $1. And that will increase in value every 2 weeks because there will be another ad-free episode. Additionally, if you'd like to just pitch a little money my way, like you're not interested in being a patron, you can go to my PayPal, which is also in there. I made a Funklit PayPal. It'll all be in the description. Links, all the links in the description. Yeah, we do. Come on, you've been talking about this. You've mentioned it like 2 or 3 times on the podcast.
All right.
We're making time for this story.
Okay. I sound upset, but I love this story, so I'm not actually upset. So Thor's wedding.
Thor's wedding.
We begin the story. Thor is married.
Yeah,
he is married.
I mentioned in the last episode.
He is married to Sif. This is not his wedding to Sif.
No.
We start. Thor has gone to sleep, and he wakes up in the morning and finds Mjolnir is missing. Which is like literally the worst thing that could happen, because the only reason the giants don't just overrun Asgard is because Thor kills them all with Mjolnir.
That's right.
So he needs that. That is how he protects Asgard. So he sends Loki to go find it. He goes, Loki, I don't know where the fuck my hammer is. Go find my hammer. Loki turns into a bird, starts flying through the 9 realms, eventually comes to the king of the giants, Thrym.
Thrym,
who I believe at this point in the story is currently sitting on a boulder making golden chains for his dog.
His giant dog?
His giant dogs. And Loki learns that he has stolen Mjolnir and hidden it underground. I think it was like 8 leagues beneath the earth.
I think it's interesting that someone was able to take Mjolnir. That's another difference from Marvel.
Yes. Yeah. Anybody could just pick it up.
As long as they're strong enough.
Right. It's heavy. But there's no, like, worthiness involved. It's purely brute force.
Mm-hmm.
If you can lift it, you can lift it. And Thrym is making this coercive deal. He's saying, I'll give you Mjolnir back, but someone has to bring me Freya as a wife.
God damn it.
That's right.
Well, just like in the Master Builder, all these giants want to marry Freya.
Apparently, she's the bee's knees. I've never met her. I hear she's great.
Sounds like she's a lovely woman.
It does. So Loki's like, all right. And he comes back and he goes, I got good news and I got bad news. Good news is I know exactly where Mjolnir's at. Bad news is Freya's going to have to marry a giant. Which, of course, Freya says, go fuck yourself. Because she's not going to marry a giant.
in Gaiman's telling of this story, that interaction was probably one of the funniest moments in the story. Because, yeah, she is basically like, go fuck yourself. I'm not helping you with shit. You've solved this problem yourself.
Yeah.
Just no.
Obviously, I don't need to marry someone just so you can have your stupid hammer back. And Thor's like, we'll all be overrun by giants if you don't.
Not my problem.
Now, Heimdall comes up with an ingenious plan.
Heimdall does?
Heimdall. He says, you know what we could do? We could put Thor in a fucking dress, pretend that he's Freya. He marries Thrym. Then he gets Mjolnir back. Perfect. And everyone else is like, this is a fantastic idea. I love this idea.
You hear that?
Thor, go ahead.
Do you hear that? For the audience, Vikings were cool with cross-dressing.
There's a caveat here. Thor says, I don't want to do that. Now, you would expect Thor, manly, masculine guy, to be like, I don't want to cross-dress. That's terrible. I'll look like a woman.
Yeah.
That is not his protest. His protest is, people will think I'm a pervert. He's not, I'll be ashamed to wear women's clothes because I'm a man. It's, people are going to think I'm a sexual deviant if I do this. I don't want people to think that about me. But Loki says, Thor, we all die if you don't do this. So Thor's like, all right. So they dress him up in a dress. They put all the stuff on you that you expect out of a bride. They put the little pointy hat. That's the bridal hat. And Loki shapeshifts into a maid because Thor's just cross-dressing, but Loki can
has
be
the
whatever Loki
actual
wants.
ability to
Right.
shapeshift.
So Loki just turns into an actual woman.
Yeah.
And goes as Freya's, air quotes, maid. They get there. Thrym's super excited. He's like, look, they're bringing me Freya. Ha ha ha, I win.
Yeah.
Throws this big feast for his wedding. At this feast, Thor just goes to fucking town on the food. Is just stuffing his face, chugging gallons of mead. And Thrym is like, whoa.
Man, he's stress eating, huh?
Is like, what is going on with Freya? I have never seen a woman eat like that.
Thrig's just so confused.
Right. And so Loki, trying to cover their ass, like, whoa, what happened was Freya was so eager and anxious to get here that she fasted for 8 days.
So she's really hungry.
So she's just really hungry and excited to be here. And Thrym's like, yeah, all right, checks out.
Sure, checks out.
At some point, Thrym goes to kiss his new bride.
Yeah.
Or bride to be. I guess they haven't technically been married yet.
So for context, or at least in Gaiman's version here, Thrym hasn't seen Thor's face.
Correct.
There's a veil covering his face, which is good because Thor has a beard.
Thor's not passing. He's not feminine presenting.
No.
So at this point in the feast, Thrym goes to lift the veil to kiss Freya, sees Thor's eyes, and is terrified. He's like, what is that look? Like they're bloodshot, fierce, terrifying. And so Loki again's got to cover their asses. Like, Freya was just so anxious and eager to get here. She hasn't slept in 8 days. So that's why she looks like that. And Thrym's like, yeah, all right, it checks out. Culmination of the feast is coming. They're like, all right, it's time to be married. So Thrym sends his sister to get Mjolnir to consecrate the marriage. Hands it to the bride, which is Thor. Thor goes, haha, you guys fucked up, and just kills Thrym and his sister and all the giants there.
He do be slaying giants. That is kind of his modus operandi.
And that is how Thor got Mjolnir back. That was his wedding.
That's fantastic.
That's it. It was a very short ceremony because, well, everybody died.
I'm so glad to know this story now because you've been alluding to it. You alluded to it last time when we covered Greek mythology. Made no fucking sense.
It's a funny story.
It is so funny.
But
it's one of my wife's favorite stories.
It's not devoid of meaning either. So in doing a little bit of research on this, the mythology, one thing that I always like to look at when I read myths is the numerology of them.
Numerology?
What do the numbers mean?
Oh, okay.
You know, so like I guess for a Christian example, there's a lot of threes.
Yeah.
You know, the Trinity.
Holy Trinity.
Yeah. Jesus was dead 3 days and then came back to life. There's a lot of threes.
Yeah.
So what do all the numbers mean? In Norse numerology, 8 is typically a number that is unlucky and means incomplete.
So what's the significance of Thor fasting for 8 days?
Right. My take is that was Loki subtly foreshadowing that this was not going to be good for Thrym.
and Thrym...
Because Thrym is like, yes, my bride. And Loki's like, she ain't eaten for 8 days. And Thrym's like, I'm going to kiss her. And Loki's like, she didn't sleep for 8 days. Like, this is this constant little nod to like, this isn't going to be good for you, Thrym. This is unlucky. This is incomplete. But bad. The marriage isn't real.
Just is not picking up what Loki's throwing down.
Sure. And in a lot of Norse stories, when something good happens or at the resolution of the story, 8 becomes 9.
Yeah.
Right? So and 9 is the number of completion. And so the day of the feast,
the ninth day,
would be the 9th day.
Yeah.
And so that could have been Thrym's misunderstanding of like, oh, but today's the 9th day, so now it's complete.
Sure.
But it really was, this is the day Thor becomes complete, gets his hammer back.
Yeah.
So that's how 8 sort of transforms into 9. And 9 is a constant reoccurring number, a lot of multiples of 3s. 9 is the number of realms connected to the world tree. There's 9 realms.
Right.
Odin hung for 9 nights in Yggdrasil.
Right.
So Heimdall is actually the son of 9 sister mothers.
Did not know that.
Yeah. Heimdall's got 9 mothers.
wonder how that
and actually,
works.
in Ragnarok, very specifically, when Thor slays Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent, he's killed by the poison, but he takes 9 steps and then dies.
Oh.
So that's sort of the completion of Thor's life, is he takes those last 9 steps.
Well, hang on. I want to circle back to this Heimdall has 9 moms thing.
Yep.
Like 1 biological mother and 8 adopted mothers?
Mm-mm.
Or like some weird
No.
godly thing where
collectively,
he was
the
in all of their
9
wombs?
The 9, and I believe they're virgin mothers, collectively gave birth.
How?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I'm just, you know what I'm picturing?
What?
I'm picturing like they each gave birth to like a little blob that came together and formed Heimdall.
Yeah, something like that. It could have been a sort of Aphrodite moment where it was birth from the ocean, birth from the sea.
Ooh, or maybe they were all in like a pool of water or
That's
the
right.
ocean, and then
Something like that.
and then they had a water birth, and you
Could be.
magic.
That's very good for you. You got to be quick with that baby, though.
Yeah,
Get that baby out of the water.
yeah.
But so it's a simple story, but there's a lot of deeper symbolism, not just the numbers. Sleep is usually a symbol of the unconscious. It's in sleep, Thor loses his hammer. That's when he is vulnerable to being stolen from. And typically your antagonist in a story like this is representative of some kind of unconscious shadow. So Thrym is like the negative of Thor. So when Thor is asleep, Thrym is able to steal the hammer.
Oh, okay, sure.
It takes the trickster to find the hammer. Thor didn't go find the hammer himself. Loki found it.
And then I should note in Gaiman's version, much like in the story that I told of Sif last episode, Thor initially assumed it was Loki that did it.
Right.
That's why he went to Loki.
And that's not an unfair assumption.
And Loki was like adamant that it wasn't him, and Thor believed him and was like, all right, fine, please help me. And Loki was like, yeah, man, we got to get that hammer back.
Yeah. Cross-dressing can be seen as a symbol of transformation. The masculine Thor would not have gotten Mjolnir back.
Wouldn't have happened.
So it took this animating feminine energy to become the person that gets the hammer back.
So funny.
And that's more directly involved with like Loki turning into a literal woman.
Yeah.
Weddings, a symbol of incorporation and coming together. And so the fact that Thor, in the feminine aspect, is, quote, marrying the negative, the shadow, is sort of the incorporation of the unconscious aspect that was Thrym.
Okay.
And in doing so, regains the hammer. He loses the hammer because the shadow was repressed and became Thrym the Giant King. He regains the hammer when he transforms into the feminine Thor and incorporates the shadow.
Sure.
However, Thrym dies, but death is a symbol of the conquered. So it's not that you become one with the shadow, because that would be negative. That's just indulging your negative impulses. It's incorporating them in a positive way. So the negative has to die. But then Thor takes off the cross-dress, and now he's masculine Thor again, but a fully incorporated Thor.
With his hammer.
With the treasure.
His manhood is retained.
Yeah. And it retained more fully.
Yeah.
So
he's recovered it.
Right. So that's the general concept that I've taken away from that story. I mean, with most things that are symbolism and sort of Jungian archetypal stuff, they could be total nonsense.
I've got one more story to tell, and then we're going to wrap up. It's called Blue of Blue from Across the Rainbow Bridge. Mm-hmm. It's a practical story that explains how to grow flocks and make linen.
Huh.
That's what Blue of Blue is.
I don't remember that one.
Like, literally.
Sounds very useful, though.
Yeah, it's literally this little girl. She chases after a goat. Goat leads her to a cave, and Freya's in there. And Freya's like, take whatever you want, child. And, like, this cave is full of gems. Mm-hmm. Right? And she's like, well, I could take these gems, and that would be a lot of money. But Freya's got these really beautiful blue flowers. Like, bluest of blue. That's the name of the story. Yeah. And she's like, I want the flowers. And Freya's like, that's very wise of you. It's a very smart choice.
That was the best one here, actually.
Yeah, and so she takes the flowers, and then Freya tells her how to grow the flowers. Mm-hmm. and gives her a pouch of flax seeds. And she's like, yeah, do this. And as long as they grow, and they grow well, you will live. And she's like, cool.
Didn't know that.
So she goes
good.
home, and she shows her mom, and her mom's like, you idiot. She's like, idiot.
You should have taken the money.
Yeah. She's not at all offended that her mom thinks she's an idiot.
Well,
And
when you're smarter than people and they go, you're stupid,
Yeah.
it's like, okay.
And her father's like, well, I mean, she has them. Let's grow them. And so they grow them. And they grow really well. And then when it's time for harvest season, Freya comes back and, appears before this kid and her mom. And then proceeds to explain to them what to do with the flocks and how to make linen.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, the future of this family is literally, they make a bank just making linen. And this little girl grows into an old woman, her whole life having, started up a new industry, really.
Yeah.
And then one day, the flax doesn't grow as well as it used to. And she's like, well, shit, I guess I'm going to die soon. And she goes back to that cave, and Freya welcomes her into Asgard. The end.
And that little girl was Dr. Glow's mom. Full circle.
Full circle. No, I've been talking. Side note, we do a podcast. Zach and I are player characters on Tales from the Scroll.
And Chris.
And Chris, our sound guy,
That's right.
is also a player on Tales from the Scroll.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're workshopping our characters right now, and I've worked out a bunch of stuff about my character. I'm super excited. I hope you guys have been doing the same, and I hope that you guys tune into that as well. Presumably, when this episode comes out, some episodes of that will also be out, and I can provide a link in some form of link dump in a description.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll be playing a human warlock named Ratasti Semnul.
I will be playing a human School of Conjuration wizard called Dr. Glow. Not his actual name.
Dr. Glow, MD.
I actually went. Actually went with his name is Anton Ayerson. And I went with that specifically because I decided that he took that name when he became a doctor, because Ayer is the doctor of the gods. There's unfortunately very few stories about her. Something else that's touched on in Gaiman's introduction to his book. And I was like, when I saw that name, I was like, well, that's awesome.
That's a good name. Gotta have that. Yep. Yeah. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing next. Irish Celtic. I'll probably do
Irish/Celtic. We're gonna kind of lump those together a little bit.
Well, specific. So the Irish were Celtic.
They were Celtic.
They were just specifically that brand of Celtic, because there was also French Celts. There was German Celts. There was a bunch of other different kinds of Celtic, and they believed certain things differently.
So it's Irish Celtic.
The Irish Celtic.
The Irish flavor of Celtic.
That's right.
Okay. Got
Just to narrow it down so we have like one timeline with one pantheon to work with.
This may be culturally insensitive, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Are there leprechauns?
They would be, man, I'm going to pronounce it real shitty. Deshiv? They're part of the fair folk.
Okay.
They're a kind of fairies, but that's what they would consider, like elves and dwarves are a part of that same group.
Oh, we're going to get into elves and dwarves and druids and shit? That's cool.
The stories that I'm going to read, probably not.
Probably not.
The elves and the dwarves and the druids will be involved, especially if I do the Battle of Mag.
Well, maybe I'll find some elf and dwarf stories to share.
Yeah, that'd be cool. There's generally two brands of fair folk. There's the land and air fair folk. Land, water, and air fair folk. They're usually pretty good.
The summer court?
You leave them alone.
Yeah.
They leave you alone. They're more or less peaceful. And then you have the underground fair folk. Consciously malevolent.
The winter
terrible people.
Yeah.
Yes. You start to see all these lines that go straight from mythology into D&D.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't help but do that because, smart business move, just incorporating literally everything possible.
Yeah. Well, you know what? One thing I learned, actually, I always knew that, like, Lord of the Rings and Tolkien stuff was based on a lot of, Western European mythology. I wasn't sure how directly in Lord of the Rings, the first dwarf is Durin, which the dwarves believe he woke up out of the ground, just woke up before everything else. Like he was the first living thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then he crafted, civilization. Durin is one of the names of the first dark elves in the Prose Edda.
Huh.
Which are the dwarves. They're just called dark elves because they live underground.
I mean, that makes sense. Because, Gaiman speculates that the Vanir, like the reason why there's that whole thing with the Aesir and the Vanir, like historically speaking, is because those were two distinct groups with their own distinct gods.
Yeah.
And in those stories, the Vanir come from somewhere that could reasonably be expected to be kind of in Western Europe.
Yeah.
So it does make sense that there's a bit of crossover there because Iceland's not that far,
No,
no.
I just and I guarantee you, Tolkien has read the Edda.
Oh sure,
There's no way he didn't.
He had to have. He was a huge nerd.
But that he took it, didn't even change the name. He's just like Durin, done, got it.
I mean,
First
why?
dwarf.
I mean, why change it?
Don't need to.
No.
Don't. I just didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I read it and I was like, that motherfucker.
That honestly makes me feel better about, like, if I ever so chose to just lift stuff like that. Because, like, I mean, it's right there. Yeah. Like, yeah, there's a Durin.
Yeah, well, I mean, and Tolkien wrote, like, the Silmarillion and Lord of the Rings and all that.
He sure did.
As, like, an attempt at creating a sort of unique English mythology. Because the thing about England is it's this gaggle fuck of Celtic, Norse, Roman, Anglo-Saxon influence.
I mean,
and those are all different groups with all their own different beliefs, and they all sort of mesh together. But one of the things that he lamented was that there wasn't anything uniquely English. Like, everything was so obviously borrowed and smashed up. But he's like, what's the English mythos? And so when he wrote Lord of the Rings, he's like, this is the English mythos. If it existed, this is what it would be. And so realistically, it is influenced by the things that were around it, like Norse mythology.
That makes sense.
Because now they both agree, at least, who was the first dwarf? It's probably this guy named Durin. If not the first, among the first. Mm-hmm. And you can learn that from up in Iceland. They agree. So it makes sense in what he was trying to do.
When we finish covering all of these myths, I would love to do a mythic D&D campaign.
Every campaign I've ever done is mythic.
Cool.
But probably not in the way that you're thinking.
No, I mean, like, literally just, like, the way I look at it. So you've got Ragnarok, right? You've got this new world. Well, you've got all these old gods that are just going to do the same shit they did before.
Right.
So it's like, it's kind of a redux.
Yeah.
Telling similar stories, but they're not exactly the same. You just got the same characters.
Well, and I would argue that's what we do.
Well, sure.
That's kind of the hero's journey, is that all of these mythological tales on a grand scheme follow the same kind of pattern.
Yeah.
And so if you're telling a story about heroes, if it's a compelling story.
I mean, there's no original story. There's roughly 6 to
you're gonna
16 types of stories, supposedly.
Right. You're going to kind of hit the same story beats. And at the end, you're going to be like, really the only thing that separates that story from myth, I mean, the only thing that separates Downton Abbey from myth is the language you're using.
Okay.
Instead of, oh, she's the daughter of some fancy lord. It's like, no, that's the daughter of Odin.
That's the daughter of Odin.
And she married this prissy little boy from fucking Suffolk. And you're just like, no. And she married an Aesir god of poetry. Mm. So you're reframing the language and the scale, but the story itself is the same. You could take any good story and just change the language, and it's like, that's a myth.
Sure.
Instead of a guy trying to carjack you, it's a dragon. You're still going to fight it. If it's a good story, you overcome it with some struggle, and you learn something from it. But whether you're fighting a guy with a knife or a dragon, you're fighting a monster. From a storytelling perspective, it's not any different.
All right, my second elevator pitch for a campaign, for a mythic campaign. It may be probably the longest campaign we'll ever do, so we're going to do it when we're ready. It's level 1 through 20.
Oh boy.
It's
That's minimum 3-year investment.
It is all of the old gods live in a new world and they're mortal, and they don't know that they used to be gods. And we, as the player characters, are going to pick a god, and we're going to be that god.
That'd be pretty cool.
Right? And so then by the time we reach level 20, that is us ascending to godhood.
Yeah, regaining divinity.
And then ending the campaign.
That'd be pretty cool. Would we be tied to a pantheon? We got to all agree on the pantheon, or does it matter? We're going to forge a newfound family pantheon?
I think we'll need to agree. Well, I mean, it would be a new pantheon, right? It would be like, okay, what gods survived? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Or what gods were reborn?
Mm-hmm. Dibs on Baldur. Immune to everything.
There you go.
I'm immune to all kinds of damage.
There you go.
Except magical piercing.
That's
it. Everything else gets me. Everything else, boom, bounce off.
Boom.
Armor class, 5,000.
All right. We're going to wrap up now.
We're going to wrap it up. Irish Celtic mythology.
Next time.
Battle Raid of Cooley. It's going to be a good time.
Thank you to Vidwest for letting us use your space.
Thanks, Vidwest.
Thank you to Chris for setting all this up.
You the man, Chris.
Thanks for being here, Zach.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And thanks to the Boone County Public Library.
Yeah. I get most of my books for this from there.
Yeah.
Or Thrift Books. Thrift Books sponsor me. Thank you to Jake Weller for doing our theme song. And thank you for listening. This is a new venture. None of us have ever made a podcast before.
Nope.
I'd like to think that it's fun for us, so I hope you're having fun listening.
That's true.
Yeah. Bye.